The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows across the cracked tiles of the third-floor bathroom at Westfield Academy. Maya Shun pressed her back against the cold metal of the bathroom stall, her heart hammering against her ribs as three figures blocked the only exit. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The smell of industrial disinfectant mixed with fear hung thick in the air, and the distant echo of laughter from the hallway seemed a million miles away. "Where do you think you're going, freak?" The voice belonged to Jessica Martinez, the self-appointed queen of Westfield's social hierarchy. Her perfectly manicured nails drummed against the sink counter as she exchanged glances with her two companions, Brittany Walsh and Chloe Stevens, both notorious for their cruelty disguised as popularity. Maya's voice caught in her throat as she tried to speak, the words barely a whisper. "I just wanted to wash my hands." The tremor in her voice was unmistakable, and she cursed herself for showing weakness. She had promised herself that this school would be different, that she could finally blend into the background and finish her senior year without incident. Jessica's laugh was sharp and calculating. "Oh, how sweet. The little mouse wants to wash her hands." She took a step closer, her designer shoes clicking against the worn linoleum. "But see, there's a problem here. This bathroom, it's not for people like you." Maya Chun had arrived at Westfield Academy 3 weeks ago on a gray October morning, slipping through the imposing oak doors like a shadow trying to escape notice. The private school's reputation for academic excellence was matched only by its notoriously rigid social structure, where family wealth and connections determined everything from lunch table assignments to college recommendations. For Maya, whose mother worked double shifts as a hospital janitor to afford even the partial scholarship that made attendance possible, Westfield represented both opportunity and danger. The campus itself was a testament to old money and older traditions. Gothic architecture stretched across manicured lawns, where ancient oak trees dropped their golden leaves onto pathways that had been walked by generations of the city's elite. The student body moved through these hallways with the confidence that came from knowing their place in the world was secure, their futures predetermined by trust funds and family connections that stretched back decades. Maya's own background couldn't have been more different. She had spent the last 4 years at Roosevelt Public High across town, a school where metal detectors and security guards were as common as textbooks. The contrast was jarring, where Roosevelt's hallways buzzed with an energy born of necessity and survival. Westfield's corridors hummed with entitlement and expectation. Here, students carried designer backpacks that cost more than Maya's family spent on groceries in a month, and casual conversations revolved around vacation homes and yacht clubs rather than part-time jobs and scholarship applications. The transition had been orchestrated by Mrs. Patterson, Maya's guidance counselor at Roosevelt, who had recognized something exceptional in the quiet girl who consistently earned perfect grades despite missing school frequently due to family obligations. When Westfield's diversity initiative opened up several scholarship spots for promising students from underrepresented backgrounds, Mrs. Patterson had practically forced Maya to apply. "You're wasting your potential," she had said during one of their meetings in her cramped office. "Your test scores are off the charts, your essays are remarkable, and your work ethic is unlike anything I've seen. But if you stay here, you'll get lost in the system. Westfield can open doors for you that don't even exist in this neighborhood." Maya had been reluctant, knowing that acceptance would mean leaving behind the familiar chaos of Roosevelt for something unknown and potentially hostile. Her instincts had proven correct almost immediately. From her first day at Westfield, she had felt like an intruder in a world that wasn't meant for her. Her second-hand uniform never quite fit right. Her shoes were scuffed from years of wear, and her accent carried traces of the working-class neighborhood where she had grown up. Every detail marked her as different, as someone who didn't belong. The academic work itself wasn't the challenge. Maya had always excelled in her studies, finding solace in the predictability of equations and the logic of scientific principles. But navigating the social landscape of Westfield proved far more complex than any calculus problem. The unwritten rules that governed student interactions were as intricate as they were unforgiving, and Maya quickly learned that even the smallest misstep could have lasting consequences. Her first mistake had been accepting an invitation to join the academic decathlon team. The invitation had come from Mr. Thompson, the faculty advisor, who had been impressed by Maya's performance in his advanced chemistry class. What Maya hadn't realized was that the team was dominated by students from Westfield's most prominent families, and her presence disrupted a carefully maintained balance of power and prestige. The team's captain was Jonathan Pierce, whose father served on the school's board of directors and whose family name adorned the library's newest wing. Jonathan had initially been polite to Maya, even welcoming, but that changed when she consistently outperformed him during practice sessions. Her ability to solve complex problems under pressure and her encyclopedic knowledge of obscure historical facts made her an asset to the team, but it also made her a threat to Jonathan's position as the undisputed academic star. The tension had come to a head during a practice session 2 weeks into Maya's tenure at Westfield. The team was working through a particularly challenging set of science questions when Maya correctly answered a question about quantum mechanics. That had stumped the rest of the group. The solution seemed obvious to her. She had been reading about quantum theory in her spare time since middle school, but the silence that followed her explanation was deafening. Jonathan's jaw had tightened almost imperceptibly, and when practice ended, Maya overheard him speaking to his girlfriend, Jessica Martinez, in hushed but angry tones. Though she couldn't make out all the words, the phrase "scholarship kid thinks she's better than us" carried clearly across the empty classroom. That conversation had marked the beginning of Maya's problems at Westfield. Jessica Martinez was everything that Maya was not: wealthy, confident, and effortlessly popular. Her father owned a chain of luxury hotels, and her mother was a prominent socialite whose charity galas regularly made the society pages. Jessica moved through Westfield's hallways like she owned them, and in many ways, she did. Her influence extended far beyond her immediate circle of friends, reaching into every corner of the school's social ecosystem. Where Maya tried to make herself invisible, Jessica commanded attention. Her perfectly styled blonde hair caught the light as she walked, and her wardrobe consisted of pieces that cost more than most people's monthly rent. But it wasn't just her appearance that made her formidable. Jessica possessed an intuitive understanding of power dynamics and social manipulation that would have impressed Machiavelli himself. She had built her empire at Westfield through a combination of charisma and calculated cruelty, knowing exactly when to extend a hand in friendship and when to deliver a devastating social blow. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Her inner circle consisted of girls who worshipped her, feared her, or both, and she maintained their loyalty through a careful system of rewards and punishments that kept them constantly competing for her approval. Brittany, Walsh, and Chloe Stevens were Jessica's most devoted lieutenants, each bringing their own particular talents to the group's reign of terror. Brittany was the daughter of a prominent plastic surgeon and had inherited both her father's attention to detail and her mother's ruthless ambition. She served as Jessica's intelligence gatherer, collecting gossip and personal information that could later be weaponized against targets who dared to challenge their authority. Chloe, meanwhile, was the group's enforcer. Her family's wealth came from a construction empire that had built half the city's skyscrapers, and she carried herself with the physical confidence of someone who had never been denied anything she wanted. Where Jessica preferred psychological warfare, Chloe wasn't. Above more direct forms of intimidation, and her athletic build and aggressive personality made her threats credible. Together, the three girls formed a triumvirate that had gone unchallenged throughout their time at Westfield. Teachers either didn't notice their behavior or chose to ignore it, knowing that complaints about the daughters of major donors would likely fall on deaf ears. The administration's tolerance for their actions was an open secret among the student body, creating an environment where Jessica and her friends operated with virtual impunity. Maya had initially hoped to avoid their attention by keeping her head down and focusing on her studies. She ate lunch alone in the library, avoided extracurricular activities beyond the academic decathlon team, and spoke only when directly addressed by teachers or classmates. Her strategy might have worked if not for her academic performance, which continued to draw unwanted attention from both faculty and students. The breaking point had come during a calculus exam the previous week. Maya had finished the test in half the allotted time, her pencil moving across the page with mechanical precision as she worked through derivatives and integrals that left her classmates struggling. When she handed in her paper and quietly left the classroom, she was unaware of the resentful stares that followed her departure. The results, posted outside the mathematics department 2 days later, showed Maya at the top of the class with a perfect score. It was the third consecutive exam where she had outperformed every other student, including several who had been attending Westfield since kindergarten and had access to the best tutors money could buy. The disparity was impossible to ignore, and it sparked conversations about fairness and merit that made Maya's presence at the school increasingly controversial. "It's not right," she had overheard Chloe saying to a group of students near their lockers. "She's taking spots that should go to people who belong here. My cousin got waitlisted at Princeton last year while kids like her get full rides just because of where they come from." The comment stung because it contained just enough truth to be painful. Maya was acutely aware that her scholarship had indeed been part of Westfield's diversity initiative, and that her presence at the school was as much about image as it was about opportunity. The administration could point to students like her when questions arose about accessibility and inclusion, using their success as evidence of the school's commitment to social progress. But Maya also knew that her scholarship had been earned through years of relentless hard work and sacrifice. While her classmates at Roosevelt had been out enjoying their weekends, she had spent hours at the public library, teaching herself advanced concepts that weren't covered in her school's limited curriculum. When her family's electricity had been shut off for non-payment, she had done her homework by candlelight, refusing to let circumstances derail her academic progress. The suggestion that her achievements were somehow undeserved or illegitimate filled her with a rage that she struggled to contain. But expressing that anger would only confirm the stereotypes that some of her classmates already held about her. So she swallowed her fury and continued to maintain the careful facade of meek compliance that had served as her shield. That facade had been tested repeatedly over the past week as Jessica's campaign of harassment escalated. It had started subtly whispered comments as Maya passed in the hallways, meaningful glances exchanged between Jessica and her friends when Maya answered questions in class, and the gradual isolation that came as other students learned to avoid association with someone who had been marked as a target. The psychological pressure was relentless and sophisticated, designed to make Maya question her place at Westfield without providing any specific incidents that could be reported to authorities. Jessica was too smart to engage in overt bullying. That might leave evidence or witnesses willing to testify. Instead, she orchestrated a campaign of social terrorism that was nearly impossible to prove, but devastating in its effectiveness. Maya's locker had been vandalized twice in the past week, once with permanent marker that spelled out "fraud" across the metal surface, and once with a sticky substance that ruined several of her textbooks. Both incidents had occurred during class periods when the hallways were empty, and security cameras in that section of the building had mysteriously malfunctioned on both occasions. Her backpack had been accidentally knocked off tables in the library, spilling her carefully organized notes across the floor. Her lunch had been contaminated with salt water, making it inedible and forcing her to go hungry on a day when she had no money to buy alternative food. Her car, a battered Honda Civic that her mother had bought used from a friend, had been keyed in the student parking lot, leaving deep scratches that would cost hundreds of dollars to repair. Each incident was designed to send a message while maintaining plausible deniability. When Maya had attempted to report the vandalism to the school's security office, she had been told that without witnesses or clear evidence, there was little they could do beyond filing an incident report. The administrator who took her statement had been polite but dismissive, his tone suggesting that he viewed her complaints as an overreaction to typical teenage drama. The isolation was perhaps the most painful aspect of Jessica's campaign. Maya watched as students who had previously been friendly began to avoid her, their discomfort obvious when she approached their tables in the cafeteria or tried to join study groups. The message was clear: association with Maya carried social risks that few were willing to accept. Even teachers seemed to view her differently, their interactions tinged with a subtle coolness that hadn't been present during her first weeks at the school. She wondered if they had been told something about her, or if they had simply picked up on the social cues that marked her as persona non grata among the student body. The stress was taking its toll on Maya's sleep and concentration. She found herself constantly looking over her shoulder, anticipating the next attack or humiliation. Her grades remained high, but the effort required to maintain her performance was becoming increasingly exhausting. She had considered transferring back to Roosevelt, but knew that doing so would mean abandoning the opportunities that Westfield could provide for her future. Her mother, Elena Chun, worked nights at Mercy General Hospital, cleaning rooms and emptying trash cans while the city slept. She had immigrated to the United States from the Philippines 20 years earlier with nothing but a nursing degree that wasn't recognized by American medical boards and a determination to build a better life for her family. The language barrier and credential issues had forced her into menial work, but she had never stopped hoping that her daughter might achieve the success that had eluded her. Alina sacrificed everything for Maya's education, working overtime shifts to pay for tutoring and test preparation, and taking on additional cleaning jobs during the summer to supplement their income. When the Westfield scholarship had come through, she had cried tears of joy, seeing it as validation that their struggles had been worthwhile. Maya couldn't bear the thought of disappointing her mother by giving up on the opportunity that Elena had worked so hard to secure. But she also wasn't sure how much longer she could endure the psychological warfare that made each day at Westfield feel like a battle for survival. The pressure had reached a breaking point that morning when Maya had discovered a note taped to her locker. The message was simple but chilling. "Meet us in the third-floor bathroom after lunch. Time to settle this." It wasn't signed, but Maya recognized Jessica's distinctive handwriting from their shared calculus class. Maya had spent the rest of the morning in a state of anxious anticipation, her stomach churning as she tried to focus on her lessons. She knew that ignoring the summons would only make things worse, but she also understood that responding to it would likely result in some form of confrontation that could have serious consequences for her future at Westfield. During lunch, she had sat alone in the library as usual, picking at a sandwich that tasted like cardboard while trying to decide how to respond. Part of her wanted to seek help from a teacher or administrator, but she knew that doing so would be seen as weakness by Jessica and her friends, potentially escalating their campaign rather than ending it. Another part of her considered simply leaving school early, claiming illness or a family emergency that would allow her to avoid the confrontation entirely. But she realized that such avoidance would only postpone the inevitable and might even be interpreted as cowardice that would invite further aggression. In the end, she had decided to face whatever Jessica had planned, hoping that a direct confrontation might finally bring their conflict into the open where it could be addressed by school authorities. It was a calculated risk, but one that seemed preferable to the slow torture of psychological warfare that had defined her experience at Westfield over the past week. The third-floor bathroom was notoriously isolated, located at the end of a hallway that was rarely used during class periods. It was the perfect location for a confrontation that Jessica wanted to keep private, away from potential witnesses who might complicate her narrative of events. As Maya had climbed the stairs after lunch, her footsteps echoing in the empty stairwell, she had tried to prepare herself mentally for whatever was about to happen. She had no illusions about Jessica's intentions. This wasn't going to be a reasonable conversation or an attempt at conflict resolution. Jessica had invested too much effort in her campaign of harassment to simply walk away now. Maya had paused outside the bathroom door, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for the handle. She could hear voices inside: Jessica's laugh, Brittany's nervous giggle, and Chloe's deeper tone discussing something in hushed whispers. Taking a deep breath, she had pushed open the door and stepped inside, sealing her fate and setting in motion a confrontation that would change everything at Westfield Academy. The bathroom itself was a relic from the school's earlier era, with ancient fixtures and cracked tiles that spoke to decades of deferred maintenance. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed and flickered intermittently, casting shifting shadows across the space that made it feel more like a dungeon than a school facility. The smell of industrial disinfectant couldn't quite mask the underlying odors of mold and neglect that permeated the air. Jessica had positioned herself strategically near the sinks, blocking the most direct path to the exit while maintaining the pretense of casual conversation with her friends. Brittany stood near the paper towel dispenser, her phone already in her hand in case documentation of the encounter became necessary. Chloe had taken up position near the stalls, her athletic frame and aggressive posture making it clear that she was prepared for physical confrontation if the situation escalated. The trap had been carefully planned and expertly executed, with each girl playing her assigned role in what was clearly a well-rehearsed drama. Maya realized that she was facing not just 3 angry teenagers, but a coordinated effort to humiliate and intimidate her into submission. As she stood there with her back against the cold metal of the bathroom stall, Maya felt the familiar surge of anxiety that had become her constant companion at Westfield. But beneath that fear, something else was stirring, anger that had been building for weeks, fueled by every small humiliation and calculated cruelty she had endured. What Jessica and her friends didn't know was that Maya's apparent meekness concealed a history that none of them could have imagined. Her quiet demeanor and academic focus had led them to see her as an easy target, someone who would crumble under pressure and eventually remove herself from their world voluntarily. They were about to discover just how wrong they had been about the shy girl they had cornered in the third-floor bathroom. Maya Chun carried secrets that would have shocked them, skills that had been honed through years of discipline and training, and a strength that had been forged in circumstances far more challenging than anything Westfield Academy could offer. The confrontation they had orchestrated was about to become something very different from what they had planned, and the consequences would ripple through Westfield's halls for weeks to come. Maya's transformation from victim to something far more formidable was about to begin, and Jessica Martinez was about to learn that some people should never be underestimated. Maya's pulse hammered against her throat as Jessica stepped closer, her designer perfume mixing with the antiseptic smell of the old bathroom. The fluorescent light above them sputtered, casting intermittent shadows that danced across the cracked tile walls like ghosts of past confrontations. "You know what your problem is?" Jessica's voice carried a dangerous sweetness, like honey laced with poison. "You actually think you belong here. You walk around with your perfect grades and your scholarship sob story, acting like you've earned something that was never meant for you." Brittany snickered from her position near the towel dispenser, her phone held at an angle that suggested she was already recording. My dad says the diversity quotas are ruining schools like Westfield. They're letting in people who can't appreciate what they're getting. Maya felt heat rising in her chest, but she kept her voice steady. I earned my place here just like everyone else. The words came out stronger than she had intended, and she saw Jessica's eyes narrow in response. Earned? Chloe laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the bathroom walls. You mean you filled out the right paperwork to get your charity case accepted? There's a difference between earning something and being handed it because you checked the right boxes. The accusation stung because Maya had heard variations of it whispered in hallways and muttered during group projects. The implication that her achievements were somehow diminished by her background, that her perfect test scores and academic excellence were overshadowed by the circumstances that had brought her to Westfield. Jessica moved closer, her heels clicking against the worn linoleum with deliberate precision. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to transfer back to whatever public school cesspit you crawled out of, and you're going to do it quietly. No drama, no complaints to the administration. No sob story about how unfairly you've been treated. And if I don't? Maya's voice was barely above a whisper, but something in her tone made Chloe shift her weight slightly, as if sensing a change in the atmosphere. Jessica's smile was cold and calculating. If you don't, then things are going to get much worse. For you think having your locker vandalized was bad. You think being ignored at lunch was painful. Sweetheart, we haven't even gotten started yet. Brittany stepped forward, emboldened by Jessica's threats. We know where you live, Maya, that sad little apartment complex on the east side. We know where your mom works, cleaning up after her. Better's at the hospital. It would be such a shame if word got around about her immigration status, wouldn't it? The mention of her mother sent a surge of rage through Maya's system that was unlike anything she had ever experienced. Elena Chun had sacrificed everything for her daughter's education, working multiple jobs and enduring countless indignities to provide opportunities that she had never been afforded. The thought of these privileged girls threatening her mother's livelihood pushed Maya past a breaking point she hadn't known existed. Leave my mother out of this, Maya said, her voice dropping to a register that made the temperature in the bathroom seem to plummet. Jessica laughed, sensing that she had found the perfect pressure point. Oh, did I hit a nerve? How sweet that you're so protective of the cleaning lady. Maybe we should pay her a visit at work. Tell her supervisors about some concerns we have. About her daughter's behavior at school. Maya's hands, which had been trembling with anxiety moments before, suddenly became perfectly still. Her breathing slowed and deepened, following patterns that had been drilled into her muscle memory through years of disciplined training. The nervous energy that had been coursing through her system transformed into something focused and controlled. What Jessica and her friends couldn't have known was that Maya's quiet demeanor masked a history that would have shocked them into silence. For 8 years, from the age of 7 until her family's financial situation forced her to quit, Maya had trained at Master Liu's Academy of Martial Arts in Chinatown. The aging Sifu had taken her under his wing after recognizing something special in the shy girl whose mother cleaned his studio in exchange for free lessons. Master Liu had been a champion in his youth, competing in tournaments across Asia before immigrating to America and opening his modest school above a dim sum restaurant. He had seen thousands of students come through his doors over the decades, but few had demonstrated the combination of natural talent, fierce determination, and inner strength that Maya possessed. Under his tutelage, Maya had mastered multiple fighting disciplines. She excelled in Wing Chun Kung Fu, with its emphasis on centerline theory and simultaneous attack and defense. She had studied Muay Thai for its devastating strikes and conditioning. Most importantly, Master Liu had taught her Krav Maga, the Israeli military fighting system designed for real-world combat situations, where rules didn't exist and survival was the only objective. The training had been brutal and unforgiving. Master Liu believed that martial arts were not a game or a sport, but a serious study of violence that required absolute commitment and discipline. He had pushed Maya beyond her physical and mental limits, forcing her to confront her fears and develop the kind of warrior mindset that could function under extreme stress. Maya had competed in underground tournaments where money changed hands and reputations were made or destroyed in a matter of minutes. She had faced opponents who were older, stronger, and more experienced, learning to use her speed, technique, and intelligence to overcome physical disadvantages. By the time she was 15, she was known in certain circles as someone to be feared and respected. The training had stopped abruptly when Elena lost her second job and could no longer afford the bus fare to get Maya across town to the academy. Master Liu had offered to continue her training for free, but Maya had insisted on stopping, unwilling to accept charity, even from someone who had become like a grandfather to her. She had promised herself that she would return to training once their financial situation improved, but college applications and academic responsibilities had consumed all her available time. For 3 years, Maya had tried to bury that part of herself, focusing instead on books and test scores and the dream of higher education that might lift her family out of poverty. She had convinced herself that violence was a tool of last resort, something to be avoided rather than embraced. The disciplined warrior that Master Liu had forged was hidden beneath layers of academic achievement and social conformity. But standing in that bathroom, listening to Jessica threaten her mother's livelihood and immigration status, Maya felt those old instincts stirring. The careful control she had maintained for years began to crack, revealing glimpses of the fighter that had never really disappeared. Jessica seemed oblivious to the change, drunk on her own power and convinced that she was dealing with just another intimidated scholarship student. "I can see you're starting to understand the situation," she continued, misreading Maya's stillness. "As submission, smart girl. Maybe you're not as stupid as I thought." Chloe stepped forward, emboldened by what she perceived as Maya's surrender. "You should thank us, really. We're doing you a favor by letting you leave with some dignity intact. Some people might not be so generous." Maya's eyes moved between the 3 girls with the calculating precision of a predator assessing multiple threats. She noted Chloe's aggressive posture and athletic build, recognizing her as the most immediate physical danger. Brittany remained focused on her phone, clearly expecting to capture Maya's humiliation rather than participate in any violence. Jessica stood with the confidence of someone who had never faced real consequences for her actions. "You're right," Maya said quietly, her voice carrying an odd note that made Chloe frown slightly. "I should thank you." Jessica's smile widened, triumphant. "Now you're being sensible. I knew you were smarter than you looked." "I should thank you," Maya continued, "for showing me exactly who you really are. For proving that all the rumors about this place were true. For making it clear that some people at Westfield believe that cruelty is a birthright and that money can excuse any behavior." The smile began to fade from Jessica's face as she realized that Maya's words didn't sound like surrender. There was something in the girl's tone that suggested defiance rather than defeat, and it sent a small chill down Jessica's spine. "What did you just say to me?" Jessica's voice carried a dangerous edge, but Maya could hear the uncertainty beneath the bravado. "I said thank you," Maya replied, taking a small step forward. "Thank you for reminding me that some situations can't be resolved through reason or compromise. Thank you for helping me remember that sometimes the only language bullies understand is the one they speak." Chloe sensed the shift in atmosphere before the others, her athletic instincts picking up on subtle changes in Maya's posture and breathing. Something about the way the smaller girl was standing triggered alarm bells in her subconscious, warning her that the easy victim they had cornered might be something else entirely. "Jessica," Chloe said, her voice carrying a note of caution. "Maybe we should." "Shut up," Jessica snapped, her attention focused entirely on Maya. "You think you can threaten me? Do you have any idea who you're talking to? My father owns half this city, and one phone call from him can destroy your little scholarship program." Maya's response was a smile that contained no warmth whatsoever. "Your father's not here," she said simply. The bathroom fell silent except for the buzzing of the overhead light and the distant sound of classes changing in the hallways below. For a moment, nobody moved, as if the entire world was holding its breath. Then Chloe made the mistake that changed everything. Perhaps it was nervousness, or maybe it was simply the aggressive instinct that had served her well on various athletic fields. But when she saw Maya's confident smile and heard the subtle challenge in her voice, Chloe's response was to reach out and grab Maya's shoulder, intending to push her back against the stall and re-establish physical dominance. Maya's reaction was instantaneous and devastating. The moment Chloe's hand made contact with her shoulder, 8 years of martial arts training took over. Maya's body moved with fluid precision, muscle memory overriding conscious thought as she executed a technique that Master Lu had drilled into her thousands of times. She grabbed Chloe's wrist with both hands, stepped backward to break the girl's balance, and then pivoted her entire body in a circular motion that used Chloe's own momentum against her. The technique was called a hip toss in judo, but Master Lu had taught Maya to execute it with the explosive power of Muay Thai and the precision of Wing Chun. Chloe found herself flying through the air before she could even process what was happening. Her body completed a full rotation before slamming into the bathroom wall with an impact that shook the building's ancient plumbing. She slid down the tiles and landed in a heap on the floor, stunned and gasping for breath. The entire exchange had taken less than 2 seconds. Jessica and Brittany stared in shock, their minds struggling to process what they had just witnessed. The meek scholarship student they had been terrorizing had just thrown their most physically intimidating friend across the room like she weighed nothing. "Chloe!" Brittany screamed, dropping her phone as she rushed to check on her friend. Jessica's face went through a rapid series of expressions: surprise, disbelief, and then a fury that was unlike anything Maya had ever seen. "You crazy bitch!" she shrieked. "Do you know what you just did?" Maya stood perfectly still in the center of the bathroom, her breathing controlled and her stance balanced. The transformation was complete. Now the nervous, trembling girl who had entered the bathroom was gone, replaced by someone who moved with the confidence and precision of a trained fighter. "I defended myself," Maya said calmly. "She put her hands on me first." Chloe was trying to pull herself upright, one hand pressed against her ribs where they had made contact with the wall. Her face was pale, and she was looking at Maya with an expression that mixed pain with genuine fear. "You're dead," Jessica snarled, pulling out her phone. "I'm calling my father right now. You'll be expelled before the end of the day, and I'll make sure you never get into another decent school anywhere in this country." Maya watched Jessica's trembling fingers try to dial and realized that the other girl was more shaken by what she had witnessed than she was willing to admit. The casual violence that Jessica had been threatening suddenly seemed very real, and she was discovering that she didn't have the stomach for actual confrontation when her victim could fight back. "Go ahead and call him," Maya said. "Tell him that 3 girls cornered one in a bathroom and threatened her mother's livelihood. Explain how you trapped me in here and made it clear that I had no choice but to defend myself. I'm sure he'll be very proud of how you've been representing the family name." Jessica's hand hesitated over her phone as she realized the complications that might arise from involving adults in the situation. Her father's political aspirations meant that any scandal involving his daughter could have serious consequences for the entire family. The last thing he would want was a public investigation into allegations of bullying and intimidation at Westfield Academy. Brittany was helping Chloe to her feet, both girls keeping a careful distance from Maya as if she might attack again without warning. The power dynamic in the bathroom had shifted completely, and all three girls were beginning to understand that they had seriously miscalculated their target. "This isn't over," Jessica said, but her voice lacked the conviction it had carried. Moments earlier, Maya tilted her head slightly, studying Jessica with the analytical gaze of a fighter assessing an opponent. "Yes, it is," she said quietly. "It's over because you finally understand something important. I didn't come here to cause trouble for anyone. I came here to get an education and build a better future for my family. But if you or anyone else tries to destroy that opportunity, you'll discover that I'm not as defenseless as you assumed." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "I've spent years learning how to handle people who think that money and connections make them untouchable. I know exactly how much force is necessary to defend myself without crossing the line into assault. And I promise you that if this situation escalates further, you won't like the outcome." The bathroom door opened suddenly, making all four girls jump. Miss Rodriguez, one of the Spanish teachers, peered inside with a concerned expression. "I heard shouting," she said, looking around the room and taking in the scene. Chloe still leaning against the wall holding her ribs. Brittany's dropped. Phone on the floor, Jessica's flushed face, and Maya standing calmly in the center of it all. "Everything's fine, Miss Rodriguez," Jessica said quickly, forcing a smile. "We were just having a conversation." Miss Rodriguez's eyes moved from girl to girl, clearly sensing that something significant had occurred, but unable to determine exactly what. Her gaze lingered on Chloe, who was obviously in some discomfort. "Are you hurt, Miss Stevens?" she asked. Chloe straightened up, wincing slightly. "I'm fine. I just slipped on the wet floor. These old bathrooms are dangerous." Maya said nothing, watching the exchange with quiet interest. She understood that Jessica and her friends were trapped by their own machinations. Any official complaint about what had happened would require them to explain why they had cornered her in the bathroom in the first place. Miss Rodriguez looked skeptical, but seemed unwilling to press the issue. Without more evidence that something was wrong. "Well, be more careful," she said finally. "And perhaps you should all return to class. The halls are getting crowded." After the teacher left, an uncomfortable silence settled over the bathroom. Jessica glared at Maya with undisguised hatred. But there was also a wariness in her expression that hadn't been there before. "You think you've won something," Jessica said finally. "But you have no idea what you've started." Maya considered this for a moment before responding. "I didn't start anything. I finished it. The question now is whether you're smart enough to learn from what just happened, or if you're going to keep pushing until someone gets seriously hurt." She moved toward the door, pausing to look back at the three girls. "I meant what I said about just wanting to get my education and be left alone. But I also meant what I said about defending myself. The choice is yours." With that, Maya walked out of the bathroom, leaving Jessica, Brittany, and Chloe to contemplate the wreckage of their carefully planned intimidation campaign. The hallways of Westfield Academy buzzed with their usual energy as students moved between classes, but Maya felt as if she was walking through a different world. The anxiety and fear that had plagued her for weeks had been replaced by a strange sense of clarity and purpose. She had been forced to reveal a part of herself that she had hoped to keep hidden, but in doing so, she had also reclaimed something that she hadn't realized she had lost. For the first time since arriving at Westfield, Maya walked with her head held high and her shoulders straight. Students who had previously ignored her or whispered behind her back now seemed to sense something different about her. There was a confidence in her movements that commanded attention and respect. Word of the bathroom confrontation spread through Westfield's halls with the speed that only high school gossip could achieve. By the end of the day, multiple versions of the story were circulating, each more dramatic than the last. Some claimed that Maya had put Chloe in the hospital. Others insisted that she had threatened to kill Jessica. A few even suggested that she was secretly connected to organized crime. The truth, as usual, was both simpler and more complex than any of the rumors. Maya had defended herself against bullies who had underestimated her capabilities, but she had also demonstrated a level of skill and control that suggested serious training and experience. Jessica spent the rest of the day in damage control mode, trying to spin the narrative in a way that didn't make her look weak or incompetent. But the facts were difficult to ignore. She and her friends had cornered a smaller, quieter girl and ended up getting the worst of the encounter. The story challenged the established social hierarchy at Westfield and raised questions about who really held power in the school's ecosystem. Maya finished her classes without incident, noting the curious stares and whispered conversations that followed her movements. Some students seemed intimidated by her, while others appeared intrigued or even impressed. The isolation that had defined her first weeks at Westfield was beginning to crack, replaced by a complicated mix of fear, respect, and fascination. After school, Maya sat in her car for several minutes before starting the engine, processing the events of the day and considering their implications. She knew that her confrontation with Jessica had changed something fundamental about her experience at Westfield, but she wasn't sure yet whether that change would prove beneficial or catastrophic. The drive home took her through neighborhoods that seemed to exist in different universes, from the manicured lawns and luxury cars of Westfield's surrounding area to the apartment complexes and corner stores of her own community. The contrast reminded her of the gulf that separated her from most of her classmates and the challenges that came with trying to bridge that divide. Her mother was already at work when Maya arrived home, beginning another long shift that would last until dawn. Maya found a note on the refrigerator written in Elena's careful English, reminding her to eat dinner and finish her homework before bed. The simple message carried all the love and sacrifice that had defined their relationship, and Maya felt a renewed determination to make her mother's efforts worthwhile. That evening, Maya sat at her desk working on calculus problems, but her mind kept returning to the bathroom confrontation and its aftermath. She had successfully defended herself against Jessica's intimidation campaign, but she understood that the war was far from over. Girls like Jessica didn't simply accept defeat and move on. They adapted their strategies and found new ways to achieve their objectives. Maya's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Her heart rate spiked as she wondered if Jessica had decided to escalate their conflict through digital harassment. But when she opened the message, she found something unexpected. "Hey, it's David Kim from your calculus class. Heard about what happened today. Wanted you to know that not everyone at Westfield is like Jessica and her crew. Some of us actually respect what you did." Maya stared at the message for several minutes, unsure how to respond. David was one of the few students at Westfield who had shown her any kindness since her arrival, occasionally sharing notes or offering to explain concepts during group work. She had assumed that his friendliness was just politeness, but his message suggested something deeper. Before she could formulate a response, another text arrived from a different number. "This is Sarah Martinez, no relation to Jessica, unfortunately. Look, I know we haven't talked much, but I wanted to say thank you. That girl has been terrorizing people at this school for years, and it's about time someone stood up to her." Then another. "Maya, this is Tom Bradley from the academic decathlon team. Just wanted to let you know that some of us have been talking, and we think it's bullshit how you've been treated. If you need backup for whatever comes next, you've got it." Maya's phone continued to buzz throughout the evening as more messages arrived from classmates she barely knew. The common thread was support for what she had done and anger at Jessica's behavior. Apparently, Maya wasn't the only student who had been targeted by the trio's campaign of intimidation and social terrorism. The messages revealed a hidden network of students who had been suffering in silence, afraid to challenge Jessica's authority because of her family's wealth and influence. Maya's willingness to fight back had given them hope that the status quo could be changed. By the time Maya went to bed that night, she had received nearly 30 messages of support from students across all grade levels. The isolation that had defined her first weeks at Westfield was giving way to something she hadn't expected. A coalition of allies who were ready to stand against the bullying and intimidation that had poisoned the school's atmosphere. The next morning brought new challenges and unexpected developments. Maya arrived at school to find a crowd gathered around her locker, where someone had taped a hand-drawn poster that read, "Hero," in bold letters. Smaller text below detailed some of Jessica's past victims and thanked Maya for finally standing up to her. Maya quickly removed the poster, uncomfortable with the attention it drew, but she could see that the damage was already done. The story of her confrontation with Jessica had evolved overnight into something larger, a symbol of resistance against the entrenched power structures that governed life at Westfield Academy. Principal Davidson appeared at her locker before first period, his expression grave but not unkind. "Miss Chun, I need to see you in my office immediately." Maya's stomach dropped as she followed the principal through hallways that seemed to part before them like the Red Sea. Students watched their passage with intense curiosity, clearly aware that this meeting would determine the future direction of the Jessica situation. Principal Davidson's office was an imposing space filled with leather-bound books, academic awards, and photographs of distinguished alumni who had gone on to positions of power and influence. Maya sat in a chair that seemed designed to make visitors feel small and insignificant, while Davidson reviewed a file that she assumed contained her academic records and scholarship information. "I've received some concerning reports about an incident that occurred yesterday," Davidson said finally, looking up from his papers. "Would you care to explain your version of events?" Maya had prepared for this moment throughout her sleepless night, considering various ways to present her side of the story without appearing to make excuses or shift blame. She understood that her future at Westfield hung in the balance of this conversation. "3 students cornered me in a bathroom and threatened my mother's job and immigration status," Maya said calmly. "When one of them put her hands on me, I defended myself using the minimum force necessary to ensure my safety." Davidson nodded slowly, making notes on a legal pad. "Miss Martinez has filed a formal complaint alleging that you assaulted Miss Stevens without provocation. She's demanding your immediate expulsion and threatening legal action if the school fails to take appropriate measures." Maya felt a chill run down her spine, but she forced herself to remain calm. "Did Miss Martinez mention why they cornered me in that bathroom? Did she explain the campaign of harassment and intimidation that led to yesterday's confrontation?" The principal's expression suggested that Jessica's version of events had been somewhat less detailed. "Why don't you tell me about that campaign?" For the next 20 minutes, Maya recounted the systematic harassment she had endured since joining the academic decathlon team. She described the vandalism, the social isolation, the destroyed property, and the escalating threats that had culminated in yesterday's bathroom confrontation. Davidson listened without interruption, occasionally making notes or asking clarifying questions. "Do you have any evidence to support these allegations?" he asked when Maya finished her account. Maya pulled out her phone and showed him photographs of her vandalized locker and damaged textbooks. She also provided screenshots of anonymous threatening messages that she suspected had come from Jessica or her friends. Davidson examined the evidence carefully, his expression growing more troubled with each image. "Why didn't you report these incidents when they occurred?" "I tried," Maya said. "I filed reports with campus security after the first 2 incidents. I was told that without witnesses or more concrete evidence, there wasn't much that could be done." The principal made another note, looking increasingly uncomfortable. "I'll need to review those security reports." A knock on the office door interrupted their conversation. Davidson's secretary entered with a worried expression. "Mr. Davidson, there's a situation developing in the hallway." A large group of students has gathered outside, and they're demanding to speak with you about the Chin situation. Davidson's eyebrows rose in surprise. What kind of group? Approximately 40 students from various grade levels. They claim to have information relevant to your investigation. Maya felt a surge of gratitude and amazement. The messages of support she had received the night before were translating into real action, with her classmates willing to risk their own standing at the school to defend her. Davidson looked at Maya with a new expression, not quite respect, but certainly a recognition that the situation was more complex than he had initially understood. It seems your story has resonated with your fellow students. Over the next hour, Davidson interviewed a parade of students who came forward to share their own experiences with Jessica's harassment campaign. The stories painted a picture of systematic bullying that had been allowed to flourish because of the Martinez family's influence and the administration's reluctance to challenge powerful donors. Tom Bradley from the academic decathlon team described how Jessica had pressured him to quit the team after he had supported one of Maya's answers during a practice session. Sarah Kim recounted how Jessica had spread false rumors about her family's immigration status. Marcus Johnson told of having his scholarship application sabotaged after he had refused to participate in Jessica's campaign against another student. The testimonies revealed a pattern of behavior that stretched back years, with Jessica using her family's wealth and connections to intimidate anyone who challenged her authority or threatened her position at the top of Westfield's social hierarchy. Maya's case was simply the most recent example of a much larger problem. By noon, Davidson had heard enough testimony to understand that he was dealing with a crisis that went far beyond a simple dispute between students. The allegations against Jessica and her friends painted a picture of institutional failure that could have serious consequences for Westfield's reputation and accreditation. Meanwhile, Jessica's father had arrived at the school, demanding immediate meeting with the principal and threatening to involve his lawyers if his daughter faced any disciplinary action. Richard Martinez was a powerful figure in the city's business community, and his political ambitions made him sensitive to any scandal that might damage his carefully cultivated public image. The meeting between Davidson, Richard Martinez, and the school's legal counsel was tense and contentious. Martinez demanded Maya's immediate expulsion and threatened to withdraw his family's substantial donations if the school failed to take action against her. But the testimonies from other students had created a legal and public relations nightmare that couldn't be easily resolved through intimidation or financial pressure. Davidson found himself in an impossible position, caught between a powerful donor who demanded results and mounting evidence that his daughter had been systematically terrorizing other students for years. The situation was further complicated by the fact that several parents of Jessica's alleged victims had already contacted local media outlets, threatening to go public with their stories if the school failed to take appropriate action. As the afternoon wore on, Maya remained in the guidance counselor's office, watching through the window as news vans arrived in the school's parking lot. The story had somehow leaked to the press, and reporters were already interviewing students about the culture of bullying at Westfield Academy. The scandal was quickly spiraling beyond the school's ability to contain it. Social media posts with the hashtag Westfield Bullying were trending locally, with students and parents sharing their own stories of harassment and intimidation. The school's carefully maintained image as an elite institution was crumbling in real time. By evening, Principal Davidson had reached a decision that he hoped would satisfy all parties while protecting the school's reputation. Jessica Martinez would be suspended for the remainder of the semester and required to undergo counseling before being readmitted. Brittany Walsh and Chloe Stevens would receive shorter suspensions and mandatory anti-bullying education. Maya would face no disciplinary action, but she would be required to attend anger management counseling to address what Davidson diplomatically described as conflict resolution skills. It was a compromise that acknowledged Maya's right to defend herself, while also addressing concerns about her use of physical force. The announcement of the disciplinary measures triggered immediate controversy. Jessica's supporters argued that she was being scapegoated to protect the school's image, while Maya's defenders insisted that the punishment was insufficient given the scope of Jessica's harassment campaign. Richard Martinez held a press conference, denouncing the school's decision and announcing his intention to transfer his daughter to another institution. He portrayed Jessica as the victim of a politically motivated witch hunt designed to appease liberal critics of elite education. The controversy dominated local news for several days, with pundits debating issues of privilege, accountability, and the culture of elite private schools. Maya found herself thrust into a spotlight that she had never sought, becoming a symbol of resistance against institutional bullying and social inequality. The attention was overwhelming and often uncomfortable, but it also brought unexpected opportunities. College admissions officers who had learned about Maya's situation began reaching out to express interest in her academic achievements and personal story. Scholarship foundations offered additional funding to ensure that her education wouldn't be disrupted by the controversy. Most importantly, the scandal led to significant changes at Westfield Academy. The school implemented new anti-bullying policies with real enforcement mechanisms, established anonymous reporting systems, and created support groups for students who had experienced harassment. The culture of intimidation that had flourished for years was finally being addressed in a meaningful way. 3 months later, Maya stood on the stage at Westfield's graduation ceremony, delivering the valedictorian speech to a crowd that included her mother, Master Liu, and dozens of classmates who had supported her during the darkest period of her high school career. Her speech focused on the importance of standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult or dangerous. Jessica Martinez was not in attendance, having graduated early from a private school in another state. But her absence was overshadowed by the presence of students who had found their own voices and the courage to challenge injustice in all its forms. Maya's journey at Westfield had been painful and challenging, but it had also revealed something important about the power of individuals to create positive change when they refuse to accept the status quo. Her willingness to fight back against bullying had not only transformed her own life, but it also created ripple effects that would benefit future generations of students. As she looked out at the audience, Maya thought about the shy girl who had first walked through Westfield's doors 8 months earlier. That girl had been hoping for nothing more than the chance to blend in and get a good education. But life had forced her to become something more, a leader, a symbol, and an advocate for those who couldn't advocate for themselves. The transformation hadn't been easy or comfortable, but it had been necessary. And as Maya prepared to leave Westfield behind and begin the next chapter of her life at an Ivy League university, she carried with her the knowledge that sometimes the most important battles are the ones we never intended to fight. Master Liu had been right all those years ago, when he taught her that martial arts wasn't just about fighting. It was about having the strength and courage to stand up for what's right, even when the odds seem impossible. Maya had learned that lesson in the most difficult way possible, but she had emerged stronger and more confident than she had ever imagined she could be. The bathroom confrontation that had terrified her at the time had become the catalyst for a transformation that extended far beyond her own life. Jessica's reign of terror had ended. Westfield's culture had begun to change, and dozens of students had found the courage to speak their truth and demand better treatment. Most importantly, Maya had discovered that she possessed reserves of strength and resilience that she hadn't known existed. The quiet girl who had once tried to make herself invisible had become someone who could stand in front of hundreds of people and speak with confidence and authority about the importance of fighting for justice. As she walked across the stage to receive her diploma, Maya smiled at the thought of what Master Liu would say when she visited him later that week. She had finally understood the most important lesson he had tried to teach her, that true strength isn't about the ability to hurt others, but about the courage to protect those who can't protect themselves. The battle in the bathroom had lasted only a few seconds, but its effects would resonate for years to come. Maya had learned that sometimes the most powerful weapon against injustice is simply the refusal to be a victim, and that one person's courage can inspire others to find their own strength. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.